Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Dear Masuma with myself, Sana Araji, and Masuma Ja'far, who will be answering your dearest concerns and queries today. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So we've been answering a few questions in the last few shows, and we've got also another interesting letter put forward to you. So inshallah you can answer this. It says, Dear Masuma, I seem to have problems with conception. After visiting the doctor, it has become apparent that my husband and I are not compatible when it comes to conceiving. We are looking at several options, such as IVF and other avenues. The question that I wanted to ask was, is it a problem that if after all of the trying and in the end it's not possible to conceive, would divorce be an option? I understand Allah has made divorce halal. However, it is frowned upon, especially in the community. The concepts of divorce to them makes it as though women who get divorced are somehow different or loose, which is disgusting of those individuals in the community. But all I want is to have babies. I just worry about being judged. Please, could you advise me on your thoughts on what I should do?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would ask, what does she mean by her and her husband not being compatible?
Okay.
So usually when you can't conceive, they check both partners out to see where the problem lies. So it's not about the compatibility between them, as far as my understanding is. It's whether there's a problem in one or the other.
Yeah.
So, she talks about divorce. Again, my view on divorce is that it should be as a last resort, because yes, Allah has made it halal, but it's something that is the most disliked allowable thing by God.
Yeah.
So it's not something that should be entered into lightly. And I'm not saying that she's entering into it lightly, but this concept of if they're checked out and the problem, is with her, then even if she marries someone else, she may not get pregnant. So again, I would advise first go to the doctor and try to have the test to see what the actual problem is. Maybe it's something that can be resolved, some way or other. And again, there are other options. When you're trying to get pregnant and you have divorce at the back of your mind, it's not conducive to the relationship.
It's not, no.
You're putting even more pressure on each other. And I think a lot of the times, it's the pressure and the stress that stops you from getting pregnant. So it may not actually be that there's something wrong, but it's something that you're putting so much pressure on it.
Thinking about it too much as well.
So you hear of people who can't get pregnant, and then they decide to maybe adopt, and all of a sudden they get pregnant because now the pressure is off.
Yeah.
So and that's another option that you have. So you have fostering, you have adoption, as well as IVF. So okay, this is not your child, but you know what? It's still a child. And as you bring up that child, you realize that it's not just giving birth that makes you a mother. It's the hard work that comes after the child is born that makes you a mother and a father. So there are lots of different options there. One, I would encourage her to take divorce out of the question. But before we move on, I do want to discuss what she's mentioned about how the community views divorce. And I think that is really, really wrong in when we judge others. And, she talks about how other women, look at divorcees as people who are different or loose. I don't think we have a right to make those judgments.
Yeah, it's a bit too much.
There's a reason they got divorced. We're not living their lives. We're not in their shoes. We don't know their circumstances. God forbid if it was my daughter, how would I feel? Then I wouldn't want other people to judge. So what right do I have to judge? Yeah, so it's important to realize that you can't behave that way. It's wrong. It's ghibah when you're talking about someone like that. It's ghibah,
Yeah.
So it's really, really wrong to do that. She says one of the other things that I maybe want her to think about is how important, she talks about how important it is for her to have this baby. Maybe I would ask her to reflect on has she made this baby her all? Because nothing should be your all except God. And maybe, and again, maybe, I'm not saying this is the reason, but maybe this is why God is not giving her this child, because she's made it her all. I'll give you an example here to explain what I'm trying to say. When you have a child, okay, and you give a child, say, a present, maybe you give the child a car or something, a toy car, and the child starts playing with this toy car, so much so that the child forgets everything else. The child refuses to eat, refuses to sleep, refuses to go to the bathroom, refuses to do anything, because that toy car is everything to them, and they don't want to let it go, and they just want to play with it all the time. As a loving parent, what will you do?
Probably take the car away from them.
Yeah. And you're not doing it as a punishment, you're doing it out of love.
Yeah.
Because you need them to realize that that can't be their all. They need to focus on the bigger things, which are much more important. Mm-hmm. They can have the car, but it needs to be something it doesn't need to encompass their whole life. Sometimes Allah doesn't give us something because that thing will become our all, and it will actually take our focus away from Allah and the bigger picture and our journey towards Allah.
SubhanAllah, yeah, when you put it that way,
Yeah. So He's not doing it as a punishment, He's doing it out of love. Okay. The other thing to recognize as well is sometimes when you can't get pregnant, a lot of the times when you do get pregnant, or even sometimes when you can get pregnant, but the first pregnancy or the second pregnancy ends up in a miscarriage. And you know, it's really difficult as a woman to handle that. And one of the main reasons why we have difficulty in being okay with that is because it feels like you've been through so much for no purpose whatsoever.
Okay.
But there is a purpose. Because God chose to give you this child, but not for this world, for the hereafter.
Okay, subhanAllah.
So you have a child waiting for you in the hereafter. And we're told that this child will be waiting to give you water. Now, obviously, we don't understand what that means, but we know that water is something that we require to live. We know water is something that is a mercy. So, you know, we know that this child will be giving us something that will help us in the hereafter. So we have a child that was created for us, but not for this world, for the hereafter. Now, when we look at it like that, it's so beautiful.
It is indeed, yeah.
And it makes it bearable to go through the pain of the miscarriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think understanding that is really, really important, because a lot of women go through miscarriage. Also, it's not my right to have a child. As a woman, I'm brought up to believe that when I grow up, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have children, and so forth. So I feel that this is my right. This is something that I am deserving of. I've not done anything to deserve this. It's not my right. God chooses to give me what will help me on my journey towards Him. He will not give me for no reason whatsoever. So there's a purpose behind me not getting, as well as there's a purpose behind me getting. So maybe reflect on, one, am I making this child my all? Secondly, what do I need to change within myself, maybe to be ready to be a mother?
Okay.
Maybe at the moment I'm not ready to be a mother. Maybe at the moment I wouldn't, it's not the thing that's going to bring me closer to God. Maybe Allah has something else planned for me, which will require me not to be a mother.
Okay.
So you hear of people who go and, work in orphanages, and they can only do that because they don't have their own children.
Exactly, yeah.
I have a very close friend who couldn't get pregnant, still hasn't got pregnant, but she's looking after her elderly parents, and her elderly parents require her to take care of her in a way that she wouldn't have been able to if she had her own children. She's doing so much with the community, which again she would not have been able to do
SubhanAllah.
if she had children. I know of another couple who are traveling all over the world, helping, in deprived areas and helping communities and so forth. Again, they would not have been able to do that if they had children. So Allah knows what is best for me. Allah knows what I'm capable of. Allah knows what will bring me to reach my potential and move me towards my perfection and move me towards Him.
For sure, yeah.
And He will give me what I require in order to do that. So although I'm focusing on this baby, maybe this baby is not what I require to reach my potential.
Maybe she's trying to fill a desire with a child that perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala thinks that she could fill in another area.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, say for example, if it was her problem that she couldn't conceive, would she be happy for her husband to put divorce on the table?
Yeah.
Or do they love each other without a child? Because you have to remember, before you have children, you married someone because you love them and they love you. So children are, how I see it, is an extension of you. I don't think that if you, obviously I do have children, so I don't understand, I can't relate to them, but I'm thinking, when you're married, you love that person regardless of in sickness and in health. So if they can't have a child, is that a valuable reason to divorce them when everything else is perfectly fine?
Yeah.
It's
I would probably take that one step further and say, just like children are an extension of your love for each other, your love for each other is an extension of your love for Allah.
Subhanallah.
So I don't love my husband because of who he is. I love him because Allah has told me to love him because he's my husband.
Yeah.
In the same way, I love my children as an extension of my love for Allah. Mm-hmm. So again, my expectations are not from him or from my children, they're from Allah, because my love is for Allah.
Yeah.
So that way then, the thing that I love most, the thing that is most desirous to me, will never be taken away from me.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas, I may never get married. So again, this question could be about marriage rather than having children.
Exactly.
Yeah. So again, it's a thing that is expected. It's my right. Mm-hmm. I'm less of. Again, this concept of being less of as a woman because I'm not a mother, because I'm not a wife. No, I am. The thing that I should be trying to achieve towards is being the abd of Allah, the slave of Allah. And I use the word slave, not servant, because a servant has rights, a slave doesn't have rights. Mm-hmm. And I need to be comfortable knowing that I don't have rights and choosing to move towards that position where I choose to become the slave of Allah, where I have no rights and I do whatever He tells me to do. So when He tells me to jump, I don't ask why, I ask how high. Mm. Yeah, and if we can go back to our graves and have that imprinted on our gravestone, that here lies a slave of Allah, I think we've made it. Mm. It doesn't matter that I wasn't a mother or I wasn't a wife. Those things aren't important. They're only for this world. But being a slave of Allah will help me on my journey towards my potential, my perfection, and in the hereafter towards paradise.
Inshallah, yeah, no, you're right. And, I'm thinking, because it says here they're newlyweds underneath here. A lot of the time it can be pressures from external family members, unnecessary pressures, burdening on a couple. Oh, why are you not conceiving yet? And they're not really considering whether it's right for the actual couple, but they're just overburdening them with stress. Oh, when we want to see what your children will look like. Can you have children? Is it? And I feel like sometimes that can really break a relationship when you're because they're not doing it for themselves, like for them. They're doing it for their own desires, the people that are pushing it upon them. Maybe they want to have grandchildren. Maybe they want to have nieces and nephews. So I do think a lot of the external factors can play a role in this as well.
I think it's that cultural expectation of you've been married so many number of years, now you should have kids. Why aren't you having kids? Mm-hmm. But also look at it from the perspective of this is a way of you getting dua. So rather than sort of looking at it from the perspective of it's none of your business, stay out of my relationship. Mm. Look at it from the perspective of if they knew that I couldn't have, or if they knew that there was a problem, without me having to go into detail about it, then maybe they might pray for me. And someone else's du'as are always more powerful. So maybe if someone says to you, why haven't you had kids? Instead of sort of getting your back up and getting annoyed about it, just say to them, pray that Allah gives me when He thinks it's right for me. Yeah. And that way, in a way, you're telling them that it's not that you don't want, you're waiting for Allah to give it to you. So maybe they might actually do a dua for you. Because you've asked them to pray for you.
Yeah.
So, you're taking the positive rather than the negative, because if I look at it from a perspective of they're interfering in my relationship, what right do they have? Or they're really selfish, or they're pushing the culture on me, or they're doing it because they want grandchildren.
Right.
I'm going to resent it. Whereas if I look at it from the perspective of maybe they're doing it because they're caring and they don't know how to ask if there's a problem or if there's something that they can help with, or how can they help? How can they help? There's nothing that they can do here except du'as. And du'as are, and I say except du'as, but du'as are so powerful that, even if there's a medical problem, it can overcome that. So using that weapon of du'a that we have and actually saying to them, you know what, pray for me. And leave it at that. And if they ask any more questions, just say, it's not important. Just pray for me.
Yeah.
And actually be comfortable with telling them it's not important that you know the ins and outs of the problem, but just pray.
Exactly. No, that's a really good idea, to be honest. And quick question as well, what I was going to ask, in order to kind of avoid these situations, would you say that couples should perhaps go and test themselves before they get married? Because I know not everyone likes to do that, but to avoid situations like this?
Honestly, I think in the end, yes, there is a scientific understanding of what needs to be present for a child to be conceived and so forth. But in the end, it does boil down to that it's up to God, and things can change.
Okay.
And I think unless it's life-threatening, so for example, I know you can have tests for certain illnesses where you can be a carrier, and if your husband is a carrier as well, then your child will be born with that illness. So those sort of tests I think are important.
Okay.
Because you're actually then maybe putting a child in unnecessary danger when they don't need to be. And if you're a carrier, as long as you marry someone who's not a carrier, then it's okay. Whereas here, if you are someone who is checked out and you're told you can't have children, then does that mean that you don't have the right to ever get married?
No, but there are instances...
Well, who's going to marry you if you sit there and tell them that, oh, by the way, I can't have kids, I've been tested?
Well, I get that, but they could meet someone that is similar to them, that has similar situations. And also, what if there are some people who know they can't conceive, but they're not honest about it when they go and propose? Now, we know, obviously, that is probably a sinful act. If you do know, it's something that you should say. But in the world we live in, not everyone is honest. So maybe to protect your own kind of self...
Again, I agree. I think you have to be honest, and I think when it comes to illnesses, you should be tested. But I think when it comes to something like this, it fluctuates.
Right.
So unless there's actually a huge medical problem which can't change, there are things that fluctuate. So it may be that say if your count is low, then you can do certain things that can increase the count. If there's a blockage somewhere, then again, certain things can be done to unblock those tubes and things like that. So there's other things that can be done.
Yeah.
I honestly think a child is a blessing that comes from Allah, and He chooses who to give to and who not to give to.
Okay.
Yes, obviously, medical science is there, but I don't think it's the all of it.
Right.
I think we're trying to take control so much, and we're really, if we sit back and realize we're not in control, we actually might live more contented, happier lives.
Yeah.
We're like those passengers who sit on the passenger side and are pressing our foot down when there's no brake there to press it down on. God's in control. God's driving, and He'll take me wherever He chooses to take me. But know that wherever He takes me, that's where it's best for me to go. That's where I'm going to grow the most. That's where I'm going to reach my potential. And know that I'm able to handle that as well, because God will give me the tools to be able to handle it. He won't put anything in my life that I can't handle. He never tests me with anything I can't handle.
Yeah, inshallah.
So maybe this is an opportunity for her to reflect and build her relationship with God.
Definitely.
Before she has that child, because then she will actually be able to role model what a Muslim woman should be when that child comes into her life.
Exactly. And once she gets there, maybe Allah, at that time it will happen.
Inshallah.
But yeah, thank you so much for that, Masuma. Again, another interesting letter. And again, we'll keep you in our prayers, inshallah. And hopefully you manage to kind of sort it out. And anyone else who's going through these issues, I guess just always bear in mind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners, and whatever is meant to be will be. And again, please do send in your queries, concerns, whatever they may be, and we will again put them forward to Masuma. So do take advantage of her being here, and anything that she's able to assist you with, she will do, inshallah. And we'll see you again for another episode another episode of Dear Masuma. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.